The History of Rome is a multi-volume history of ancient Rome written by Theodor Mommsen. Originally published by Reimer and Herzl, Leipzig, as 3 volumes during 1854 to 1856, the work dealt with the Roman Republic. A subsequent book was issued which concerned the provinces of the Roman Empire. Recently published was a further book on the empire, reconstructed from lecture notes. The initial 3 volumes won widespread acclaim upon publication. Indeed, the Roman history made Mommsen famous in a day. Still reading qualifiedly cited, it is the prolific Mommsen's most well-known work. The work was specifically cited when Mommsen was awarded the Nobel Prize. Genesis. Writing the history followed Mommsen's earlier achievements in the study of ancient Rome. He had not himself designed to write a history, but the opportunity presented itself in 1850 while at the University of Leipzig, where Mommsen was a 32-year-old special professor of law. Invited to give a public lecture while at Leipzig, I delivered an address on the Gracchi. Reimer and Herzl, the publishers, were present, and 2 days later they asked me to write a Roman history for their series, having been dismissed from the university for revolutionary activities. Mommsen would accept the publishing proposal, partly for my livelihood, and partly because the work greatly appeals to me. The publishers specified that the work focus on events and circumstances, and avoid discussing the scholarly process. While they certainly wanted a well-respected academic work to fit their acclaimed series on history, Karl Reimer and Solomon Herzl were also seeking one with literary merit that would be accessible and appeal to the educated public. As a scholar, Mommsen was an active party in recent advances made in ancient Roman studies. Yet Mommsen also had some experience as a journalist. He might well manage to become a popular academic author. It is high time for such a work, Mommsen wrote to an associate in Roman studies. It is more than ever necessary to present to a wider audience the results of our researches. Publication. Originally the history was conceived as a 5-volume work, spanning Roman history from its inception to the Emperor Diocletian. The first 3 volumes, which covered the origin of Rome through the fall of the Republic, ending with the reforms of Julius Caesar, were published in 1854, 1855, and 1856, as the Römische Geschichte. These 3 volumes did indeed become popular, very popular. Their success was immediate. Here, a professional scholar presented his readers with a prose that was of such vigor and life, such grasp of detail combined with such vision, such self-confident mastery of a vast field of learning, especially in Mommsen's 3rd volume, as the narrative told of how the political crisis in the Roman Republic came to its final climax. He wrote with a fire of imagination and emotion almost unknown in a professional history. Here was scientific learning with the stylistic vigor of a novel. These first 3 volumes of the Römische Geschichte retained their popularity in Germany, with 8 editions being published in Mommsen's lifetime. Following his death in 1903, an additional 8 German editions have issued. Later volumes, a planned 4th volume covering Roman history under the Empire was delayed pending Mommsen's completion of a then 15-volume work on Roman inscriptions, which required his services as researcher, writer, and editor, occupying Mommsen for many years. After repeated delays, the projected 4th volume was eventually abandoned, or at least not completed. An early manuscript may have been lost in a fire. In 1885, however, Mommsen had ready another work on ancient Rome, later translated into English as The Provinces of the Roman Empire. In Germany it was published as the 5th volume of his Römische Geschichte. In 13 chapters it describes the different imperial provinces, each as a standalone subject. Here there was no running narration of major Roman political events, often dramatic, as was the case in Mommsen's popular chronological telling of his earlier volumes. In 1992, a reconstruction of Mommsen's missing 4th volume, On the Empire, was issued. Its sources were lesson notes taken by two related students, Sebastian Hensel and Paul Hensel, of lectures delivered by Professor Mommsen during 1882 to 1886 regarding his courses on Imperial Roman history, given at the University of Berlin. These student notes were discovered in 1980 at a used bookshop in Nuremberg by Alexander Demand, then edited by Barbara Demand and Alexander Demand. The resulting German text was published in 1992. The Hensel family was distinguished, the son becoming a philosophy professor, the father writing a family history with regard to his mother's brother the composer Felix Mendelssohn, and the paternal grandfather being a Prussian court painter. In English, the contemporary English translations were the work of Dr. William Purdy Dickson, a divinity professor at the University of Glasgow. The first three German volumes were published during 1862 to 1866 by R. Bentley and Son, London. Over several decades, Professor Dickson prepared further English editions of this translation, keeping pace with Mommsen's revisions in German. All told, close to 100 editions and reprints of the English translation have been published. In 1958, selections from the final two books of the three-volume in history were prepared by Deborah A. Saunders and John H. Collins for a shorter English version. Provided with new annotations and a revised translation, the book presents an abridgment revealing the historical chronology, with rigor. Mommsen is shown narrating the grave political drama and illuminating its implications. The book closes with his lengthy description of the new order of government adumbrated by Julius Caesar. With regard to Mommsen's 1885 fifth volume on the Roman provinces, Professor Dr. Dickson immediately began to supervise its translation. In 1886 it appeared as the provinces of the Roman Empire, from Caesar to Diocletian. Mommsen's missing fourth volume was reconstructed from student notes and published in 1992 under the title Römische Geschichte. It was soon translated into English by Claire Crogesel as A History of Rome under the Emperor's Review of Contents. The Republic with Exceptions. Mommsen in his Römische Geschichte narrates the straight chronology of historic events and circumstances. Often strongly worded, he carefully describes the political acts taken by the protagonists, demonstrates the immediate results, draws implications for the future, while shedding light on the evolving society that surrounds them. The chronology of the contents of his 5 books are in brief. Book 1, Roman Origins and the Monarchy. Book 2, The Republic until the Union of Italy. Book 3, The Punic Wars in the East. Book IV, The Gracchi, Marius, Drusus, and Sulla. Book V, The Civil Wars and Julius Caesar. The broad strokes of Mommsen's long, sometimes intense narrative of the Roman Republic were summarized at the 1902 award of the Nobel Prize in a speech given by the Secretary of the Swedish Academy. At the beginning, the strength of Rome derived from the health of its families, e.g., a Roman's obedience to the state was associated with obedience of son to father. From here Mommsen skillfully unrolls the huge canvas of Rome's long development from rural town to world capital. An early source of stability and effectiveness was the stubbornly preserved constitution, e.g., the reformed Senate composed of patricians and plebeians generally handled public affairs of the city-state in an honorable manner. Yet, the great expansion of Rome and the consequent transformations worked to subvert the ancient order. Gradually, older institutions grew, incapable of effectively meeting new and challenging circumstances, of performing the required civic tasks. The purported sovereignty of the comitia became only a fiction, which might be exploited by demagogues for their own purposes. In the Senate, the old aristocratic oligarchy began to become corrupted by the enormous wealth derived from military conquest and its aftermath. It no longer served well its functional purpose. It failed to meet new demands placed on Rome, and its members would selfishly seek to preserve inherited prerogatives against legitimate challenge and transition. A frequently unpatriotic capitalism abused its power in politics, and by irresponsible speculation, the free peasantry became squeezed by the competing demands of powerful interests. Accordingly, its numbers began to dwindle, which eventually led to a restructuring of army recruitment, and later resulted in disastrous consequences for the entire Commonwealth. Moreover, the annual change of consuls began to adversely impact the consistent management of its armed forces, and to weaken their effectiveness, especially in the era following the Punic Wars. Eventually it led to the prolongation of military commands in the field. Hence, Roman army generals became increasingly independent, and they led soldiers personally loyal to them. These military leaders began to acquire the ability to rule better than the ineffective civil institutions. In short, the civil power's political capabilities were not commensurate with the actual needs of the Roman state. As Rome's strength and reach increased, the political situation developed in which an absolute command structure imposed by military leaders at the top might, in the long run, in many cases be more successful and cause less chaos and hardship to the citizenry than the corrupt and incompetent rule by the oligarchy of quarreling old families who de facto controlled the government. Such was his purpose when the conservative optimate, the noble and Roman general Sulla, seized state power by military force, yet he sought without permanent success to restore the Senate nobility to its former power. Political instability soon returned, social unrest being the disagreeable norm. The conservative renovation of the Republic's institutions was abandoned and taken apart. Eventually the decisive civil war victory of the incomparable Julius Caesar, followed by his executive mastery and public-minded reforms, appeared as the necessary and welcome step forward toward resolution of the sorry and bloody debacle at Rome. This, in the dramatic narrative of Theodor Mommsen. Mommsen's penultimate chapter provides an outline of the nation-building program begun by Caesar following his victory. Institutions were reformed. The many regions ruled by Rome became more unified in design, as if prepared for a future empire which would endure for centuries. This, during Caesar's last 5.5 years alive. His work at statecraft included the following: the slow pacification of party strife, nonetheless with republican opposition latent and episodically expressed, his assumption of the title imperator, with reversion of the Senate to an advisory council, and the popular comitia as a compliant legislature. Although law might be made by his edicts alone, his assumption of authority over tax and treasury, over provincial governors, and over the capital, supreme jurisdiction over the continuing republican legal system, with the judex being selected among senators or equites. Yet criminal courts remained corrupted by factional infighting, supreme command over the decayed Roman army, which was reorganized and which remained under civilian control, reform of government finance, of budgeting re-income and expense, and of corn distribution, cultivation of civil peace in Rome by control of criminal clubs, by new city police, and by public building projects. Impossible problems: widespread slavery, disappearance of family farms, extravagance and immorality of the wealthy, dire poverty, speculation, debt. Caesar's reforms, favoring families, against absentees, restricting luxuries, debt relief, personal bankruptcy for unpayable debt, replacing enslavement by creditors, usury laws, road building, distribution of public agricultural lands in a moderated Gracchan fashion, a new municipal law. Mommsen writes, W.E. may well conclude that Caesar with his reforms came as near to the measure of what was possible as it was given to a statesman and a Roman to come. Regarding the Roman provinces, former misrule and financial plundering is described, committed by Roman government agents and Roman merchants. Caesar's reforms replaced the quasi-independent Roman governors with those selected by the imperator and closely supervised. With reduction in taxes, provincial oppression by private concerns was found more difficult to arrest. Abatement of the prior popular notion of the provinces as country estates, to be worked or exploited for Rome's benefit. Favors granted Jews. Latin colonies continue. Cultural joining of Latins and Hellenes. Italy was converted from the mistress of subject peoples into the mother of the renovated Italo-Hellenic nation. Census of the Mediterranean population under Rome taken. Popular religion left free of additional state norms. Continuing development of the Praetor's edict, and plans for a codification of law. Roman coinage, weights and measures reformed. Creation of the Julian calendar. The rapidity and self-precision with which the plan was executed proved that it had been long meditated thoroughly and all its parts settled in detail. Mommsen comments. His was probably the meaning of the words which were heard to fall from him that he had lived enough, the exceptions to the straightforward chronology are the periodic digressions in his narrative, where Mommsen inserts separate chapters, each devoted to one or more of a range of particular subjects, for example, the original constitution of Rome, the Etruscans, law and justice, religion, agriculture, trade, commerce, measuring and writing, the tribunate of the plebs and the decemvirate, law, religion, military system, economic condition, nationality, art and science, Carthage, the government and the governed, the management of land and capital, faith and manners, literature and art, the peoples of the north, the Commonwealth and its economy, nationality, religion, education, the old republic and the new monarchy, religion, culture, literature, and art. Mommsen's expertise in Roman studies was acknowledged by his peers as being both wide and deep, e.g., his direction of the ancient Latin inscriptions project, his work on ancient dialects of Italy, the journal he began devoted to Roman coinage, his multi-volume Staats Recht on the long history of constitutional law at Rome, his volumes on Roman criminal law, the Strafrecht. His bibliography lists 1,500 works. The provinces of the Roman Empire contains 13 chapters, namely, Northern Italy, Spain, Gaul, Germany, Britain, the Danube, Greece, Asia Minor, the Euphrates and Parthia, Syria and the Nabateans, Judea, Egypt, and the Africa provinces. Generally, each chapter describes the economic geography of a region and its people, before addressing its imperial regime. Regarding the north, military administration is often stressed, while for the east, the culture and history. A quarter of the way into his short introduction to the provinces, Mommsen comments on the decline of Rome, the capital city. The Roman state of this epoch resembles a mighty tree, the main stem of which, in the course of its decay, is surrounded by vigorous offshoots pushing their way upward, these shoots being the provinces he here describes. The Empire. Mommsen's missing fourth volume, as reconstructed by Barbara Demand and Alexander Demand from lecture notes, was published as Römische Geschichte in 1992, thus appearing many years after third volume, and the fifth. It contains 3 sections of roughly equal size. The first section is arranged chronologically by Emperor: Augustus, Tiberius, Gaius Caligula, Claudius, Nero, the year of 4 emperors, Vespasian. The chapters of the second section are entitled General Introduction, Domestic Politics I, Wars in the West, Wars on the Danube, Wars in the East, Domestic Politics II. The third section, General Introduction, Government and Society, A History of Events, this the longest subsection, arranged by emperors: Diocletian, Constantine, the sons of Constantine, Julian and Jovian, Valentinian and Valens, from Theodosius to Alaric. This rescued work contains a great wealth of material, in which one follows in the footsteps of a master historian. Yet, perhaps because of its nature as reconstructed student lecture notes, it more often lacks the fine points of literary composition and style, and of course the narrative drive of the original 3 volumes. Nonetheless, it is well to remember that the students involved here in taking the lecture notes were themselves quite accomplished people, and one listener and recorder was already a mature father.